All right, so our current state of the app is we have our meetings, our calendar view, and those all link to the actual meeting you've scheduled. We've got start time, end time of the meeting, and what's soon to come will be Stripe integration. But first I want to focus on comments. So let's go ahead and get that squared. And we need a new model for the comment itself. So let's go ahead and generate that. Okay, so with this generation, we're going to generate the model. It's going to have a reply type of text, and a meetings belongs to, which is you can do inline on the command here, which is pretty nice. So that will say that a comment is going to belong to a meeting, basically. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I actually messed up earlier and did a generation of this, so it's telling me I've already got identical stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and overwrite what's there for now, and all should be square, so don't worry if you don't see the same thing. So I'll open this up. This is our migration right here. This is what it looks like, and that's pretty much what we want. So I'll run that with Rails DB migrate that in. Cool. So that's in, and our database should be updated in our schema, so to speak. So if we go here, we'll have that new table, and we have a meeting ID since we did that association. So that's already set up by default thanks to that inline command we ran. So we don't have to add that on our own in a new migration, which is handy. But we do still need to modify our models a bit to get this to work. So a meeting is going to have many comments. So we'll say has many comments, but we're going to make it dependent destroy too. So on a comment, we should have that association already there since we ran that in that generation, which is super helpful. So we saved some time doing that, although it is more to remember. So next, we want to be able to save a user to the associative comment. This is helpful for getting the current user's ID and stuff on that comment. Have that user be able to edit it. This is also helpful. I'm not going to go that far in this app, but we can do so. So what I want to do on top of what we just generated is first generate a comments controller, which we can do Rails generate controller. And it's going to generate just generic stuff that comes along with it, like a SCSS file and a CoffeeScript file, but we don't really need to worry about those at the moment. It did create a views directory, which is nice. We'll be adding some partials and JavaScript to that coming up. But on top of that, I want to add one more generation that is a migration. And we're going to add user ID to comments. And we'll just say user ID integer. Then we can add an index on that too. Index is just a quicker way to look up a particular ID on a table. It has its perks and it has its downsides. It takes up more space, but your database can move a lot faster with an index in play. I'm sure developers out there can explain it way better than I just did, but that's just what I know. So I'll run this, and it should create a new column of user ID, as well as add an index in our database folder right here. That looks pretty good to me. So we can go ahead and migrate that as well. Cool. So that's in. Then we need to update our routes. Because I want the comments to live on the actual meeting page, the show page, we can update that to actually happen, or at least look like it should be there with the routing. So it's nested in essence. So what I'll do is go to my routes folder, go to meetings, and we'll actually do a do block here to make sure it is nested as I just said. So we'll do, and you can just add the same resources comments here. So this is a shorthand way of basically writing all of the create, read, update, and destroy paths in an app to go ahead and just let that work. Rails is smart enough to make that all happen with the routes. Typically you'd restart your server, but so far, I haven't been needing to do that with the latest version of Rails, which is nice. So we should be set as far as I can tell. So one thing we need to do is update our controller on the comments as well as the meetings controller. If you remember way back, I mentioned on the meetings controller that we needed to have the comment instance in the show view to hook into our form that we're about to update. So we need this to go ahead and do that with. That will make more sense in a minute. Let me go back to the comments controller next and do some work there. This one's going to have basically boilerplate code, but some stuff where we need to get fancy with how we perform and find a given meeting, as well as the comment to make sure the comment is left in the right place and can be left in the right place. So as always, I want to authenticate the user. This should be already at this point, but it does not hurt to keep checking for this or establishing this. So then, of course, we want to set action or find the comment. So we can do that for multiple actions at once by doing like a method like set comment and just say only create and destroy, I think is all I need. So there it shouldn't be before comment either, before action. Cool. And that should be destroy. And then we want to set the meeting too. So before action, we need to find both to do a comment. Since it's also a nested route, you need both the meeting ID and the comment ID to do much of anything. So that's something to take into account. Thing we need on the new path is the comment itself. Let's go ahead and set up our private methods. So that'll look like this. So we'll set the meeting first. And this correlates with this. So the before action, before this controller can do anything, we're checking this stuff. It's just a way to initialize things. So a meeting is going to go and get the meeting and find it by the params meeting ID. That's how we're getting the meeting. And then the comment will set like so. So comment find params ID. So params are what's being passed through the request in most cases. It's also almost relative to the URL. Meeting ID is going to be the column that's coming through on the comment when something happens on the comments controller. So we're going to be querying the comment to find the ID of it, and then through it we're going to find the meeting. So it's complicated as hell, but it all ends up working really well, and it's nice to just have these conventions so we don't have to work too hard to understand it. Even though I've tried my best to describe it, I feel like I'm failing at doing so, so bear with me. But essentially on any controller we need to permit parameters, so we'll do that. And it's going to be reply. The main action we need is the create and then of course destroy. So to create one, we'll get our comment instance and we'll set it to meetings .comments .create, and then we can pass in the param of comment. And permit the reply inline like this. But we also need to permit the meeting ID itself. So if you remember on our database table, we have the meetings ID right there. I feel like I shouldn't have typed that as meetings ID. Let me double check that should be right. Yep, I typed that wrong, guys. So let's roll back. Here's how we can do it. We can do Rails DB rollback. So that adds the user to the comments. For reverting that one, I need to revert the one before that, so I can just run this again. There's create comments. I can go back to that create comments migration. So this is currently out of the database. I want to change that to this. And I think we should be good. So then I could just rerun rake db migrate or rails db migrate. And we migrated that stuff in. That schema should update. You never want to edit this directly. So then we have meeting ID, and we can pass in meeting ID there. So that makes way more sense. Would have had a lot of errors with that otherwise. So with that out of the way, let's go and work on our comments controller create. So there's meeting ID, and then we want to take the comment.user ID, hence why we added it in that very last migration, and then just set the user ID to it. So if you recall comments, we have a user ID and a meeting ID now. And then we can respond to the requests of that happening in specific ways. And this is how you can loop through each of those and do things differently. So you can respond to like HTML requests, JavaScript requests, AJAX requests, JSON requests. It's pretty nifty. And they can all happen at once too if you need multiple. So I added the HTML just in case you want to use it. But I'm going to use JavaScript in the end to render this with AJAX, so it just doesn't update the page when you add a new comment. And that sounds trickier than it really is. Once you get used to the way it works with Rails, it's pretty seamless. So what this will do when we pass this format.js, it's going to automatically know to use this instead of this. The fact that this is even here is what clues it in. So then we'll render create.js.erb in that light. So it'll know to look for that in our views file. So I can go ahead and create that in the comments. I won't work with it just yet, but I'll just have it ready. Cool. And what I'll do there is basically that, and then we could do an else, and then we have our end. So else we'll format HTML, redirect to meeting path, because I want it to redirect to the meeting, not just the comment or anything, even though you could queue the comment in if you wanted. Notice we'll just say your comment did not save. Please try again. Cool. And then we'll do the same with the format.js here. All right, that's the end of the create. I do need one more in block there, I believe. Yeah, I forgot to do this bit, so excuse me. It should be if checking to make sure it persists and saves to the database. If it does, we'll do these things. If not, we'll render these things. For destroy, we'll do kind of a similar concept. We'll get the comment through the meetings. And the comment perform destroy right onto it. redirect to meeting path, the meeting itself. So I won't worry about doing this with AJAX or anything, though you could. It would just be destroy.jsrb in this case. Cool. All right, so now we can do all those actions. What's next is to update our views. So let's go ahead and do that. In my comments folder, I'm going to have two more partials. One's going to be the comment, and one, of course, is the form. So in the comments, let's do the form first, just so I could give you some context. So we'll just do, we could just say like comment as current user dot username, just so you know, hey, it's you who you're commenting as. Form 4, so this is Rails stuff, not simple form. Meeting, we got to pass in both the meeting and the comment here due to the routing. So if you recall, this is our URL. Once comments are a thing, we'll have something like this as our URL structure. We need both of these IDs to do anything, and that's how this form is going to work. You can go pretty deep with how far to nest this, but Rails folk recommend not going more than 2 levels deep in terms of nesting. The main thing here is to pass in remote true, because we're going to do this with AJAX, hence that format we just passed in the controller. So we'll have our form, and I'll have a div of relative. Here's where Trix is gonna come into play too. I should note that. So we're gonna have a hidden field of what would normally be the text field here. So we'll do reply, since that's what our comment's gonna be called. I'll just do a class. I'll keep these classes in case you want to see it. Input h32, border gray light, resize none. Placeholder is what? Add any notes or replies here. Cool. So I could just take this out for now too, to show you how Trix works too. It's pretty neat. So below you can just pass Trix editor and pass the same, what would be the ID of this if you were to look at the view source. I happen to know that Rails will call this comment reply based on the model name. And the ID will pass as comment. We're gonna target this with JavaScript, so I'm gonna give it something unique here to hook into, and then we'll have a class h32 and padding, some padding there. Cool, and that's all you need for the Trix part. We'll go back and make that other field hidden. But let's add the submit button. And this again will be class. We'll have quite a few classes. In fact, oh my gosh, I'm gonna copy this. Gargantuan amount. Feel free to copy these guys. It's not a big deal if you want. Okay, so I'll show you some context here once we get this rendered in our show page of the meeting. So let me go back and render the form. Close a few files. So in our show on meetings, go down to here and just uncomment this and make sure we have an equal sign at the beginning. There's the form, but this is how Trix works. Basically, anything you type in here is going to get output into that field above. It's pretty neat. Pretty neat. So anyway, that's how that works. So you just want to basically hide this other field. So we can just say hidden field. Cool. So one caveat to this is we need to sanitize what gets output, since that HTML could potentially be harmful to the app if it were like some malicious script or JavaScript of some sort. So we'll do that in the comment itself, and that's going to look like this. So flex. Okay, so with this partial, we're going to render the comment username, and you can hook into the username thanks to the belongs to association on the user. Actually, we probably need to add that still. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to our user. It's going to has many comments. And the same thing in dependent destroy here. So a user can have multiple comments, of course. So with that in mind, we can render comments once they're made. But essentially, we have the comment, the username, thanks to that association we just added. We have the comment created at in this handy helper of time ago in words. It's kind of a nice thing to have. This one is where we're going to sanitize the output of the Trix editor, just in case there's any malicious scripts or anything in there. This will handle that for us. That's built into Rails. And here's the basic reply that will come back. And then if it's the author, if you're the author of the particular comment, you can go ahead and delete it. Otherwise, you cannot. And that's one of our helpers we added early on right here, where it checks if you're signed in and also the current user of the ID of you related to the thing itself, since we saved the user ID on the comment field now. So that's a way we can hook into that. So all in all, this should be pretty close. I think we need to add our JavaScript next to make this work with the AJAX. Right now, if you were to go ahead and add a comment, nothing would happen on the screen until you refresh the page. So what we want to do is add some JavaScript to make that work. So I'm going to go in here, js.erb file. You can write JavaScript, but also render Rails stuff, which is handy. So you can hit vars comments equals, get the element by ID. And I want to get the comment field too. So that's going to be comment reply, and then the Trix field too. So Trix equals document. I don't typically like to use IDs, but they seem to work better for this scenario. I could be wrong though, and just be thinking they do. So that's the ID we added to the Trix field itself, or the Trix element. And then we want to get the comments and insert adjacent HTML, and it'll be before end. And then we can render an actual partial in this view, which is sweet. So we can just do Rails specific stuff and perform this escape JavaScript thing that essentially, executes JavaScript safely. And we can just render the comment partial itself, which hooks into this thing, the comment view itself, and knows to render that directly. It's very Rails convention worthy stuff there. But then also once we render the comment, I want to make the field clear itself. So we can set value on the input to none, which is the one that's hidden, and then the Trix field inner HTML, since it renders other stuff, to none. Very cool. So if all goes well, assuming I typed everything right here, we should be fine to try this out. Before we do, need to make sure that it is active in our show theme though. So here's where that comments ID comes from. If you recall, I grabbed it here. I'm also getting the comment reply based on the ID that comes out of the comment form, which would be the ID there. And then I'm also getting the Trix editor ID, which I've added manually, the comment reply Trix. So all those things combined allows us to do all this stuff on the fly, which I'm hoping will work right here. So I can say test comment, and it looks like something's up. So let me double check first the JavaScript. Looks like no errors, and then our logs. Completed, okay. Processing complete. Active record not found, could not find comment without an ID. Looks like I've got something up with my controller. So let's go double check that. Alright guys, I figured it out, and it ends up being the association was off on my comment model. It needed to belong to a user, and silly me, I think part of that reason why it wasn't working. So let's see if this works. You see I misspelled meetings there. That's a big reason why that wasn't working. If you ran into that yourself, I apologize. My fat fingers can't type. So let's try this again. See if we still get some scenario like that. Looks like I do. Let me try restarting my server. Alright guys, so that took entirely too long, but I had a typo in my comments controller. I've cleaned up this bit as much as I can, and then just went ahead, added some constraints and some commenting to just go ahead and explain this on your own once you maybe take this down and try it yourself if you want to follow along. Long story short is I just can't type. But other than that, our comments work. There is a caveat on if you click this button, it will still make a empty comment, which isn't good. So we can maybe disable that by default or do some JavaScript around it, or some sort of controller side thing that would make that prohibit. I'm going to leave that out for now due to the sake of time, but I can test the comment and maybe do bold text and italicize, and we should get that formatted nicely down here. It shows that I commented less than a minute ago, and I can go ahead and delete it since I am the person that commented. So let me go ahead and just leave a few comments. Eventually we'll see what this looks like from another user's perspective. And actually, in retrospect, this won't be shown for the person, any other public person, because they're only going to be able to see their own meetings. So this is only relative to the commenter, but also to the admin, because we can go ahead and make that available to them too if we wanted. But I don't think I did that in this particular app, but you can go ahead and do that on your own. Aside from that, I'm going to go ahead and start setting up the Stripe integration. So we want to add a form at the bottom of each new session that has a payment field, and we want to charge a certain amount for that. So so far so good. Our commenting is working out of the box after some trial and tribulation there, but all's well. So let me go and figure out the next steps for creating our form on the Stripe side.